Alright, so in this video we're going to talk about how you can take your photographs and turn them into interesting graphic elements as part of your designs. And what you're looking at right now is what we're going to be creating. We've got a number of different photographs in here and a number of elements we're going to create right from scratch. So, pretty cool stuff. So we'll break it down and show you the elements we've got. We've got the background layer, which is just a simple stock texture, and this will be available for download. And I've got the photograph of the girl I'm going to use, and we've got the city that's going to be in that background area. So, 3 separate photographs, and let's put them together into a cool design. So let's start with the picture of the city here. Well, and you can notice I'm just clicking on the tabs as I'm toggling through here. And so we have the city image. So we need to process this so it's going to be part of that graphic. Well, all I'm going to simply do is use a common tool, something that's been in Photoshop for some time, and that's under the image menu inside adjustments right here to threshold. And you can see what it does is it forces all the pixels in the image to either black or white based on the tonal range. You can take the slider here and determine how much of an area is shown. Well, I want to get as much white detail in the city area that I want before anything else starts to come into view. Like you can see up here in the upper right that the sky is starting to come in. So I want to get it to just before that starts coming in, to right about that setting there. So once that looks good, I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to press Command or Control I because I want to invert the values of this, because I want the detail or all these lighted areas to actually be black on my original image. So I'm just going to press Command or Control I, and it will invert the values. And let's take this and bring it into our document. I'm going to click and drag it right up to the name of that texture file, which is right up here. And when I release my mouse right inside, it'll just drop it right in there, and that looks pretty good. And I'm just going to go in here, I'm going to press Command or Control T, and let's just size this up. I'm holding my Shift key down. And I'm going to scale this up a little bit. I'm going to position it right about here, maybe with that tall building right out of view there. So I just want to get all these elements here. I'm going to press Enter. And there we have our image. Now I'm going to go into the Layers panel, and to blend it with my original layers here. Oh, get that workspace back to there. Okay. So I want to blend it with the background texture, and like I said, I just want to see those black areas, so all we're going to do is change the blend mode to multiply. And there that graphic element is there. I can move it around, you can do all kinds of cool things with it. So it's on its own layer. So let's jump over to the next element, which is this picture of the girl. Well, I'm going to do a quick levels adjustment on this. I'm going to actually press Command or Control L to bring up levels here, and we're just going to click the white eyedropper and just click in that background area because I know for a fact that it's supposed to be white because we shot against a white background here. So click that, and all the other color falls into place in the tonal range, so click OK. And now we're going to do what we just did to that city image. We're going to go to the image menu, into adjustments, and do the threshold. And here you're going to want to mess with the slider depending on how much detail you want to have in there. You can see that it just gets too messy around the eyes at this setting. So we're going to bring that down until we can make out the eyes just a little bit. We don't want to lose the mouth there. You can see the mouth is really starting to go away and the nose too. So just be cautious of the overall detail of your image here. And the reason why I like this photo is that she's got some hair that's kind of scattering out here. It's going to add to that kind of grungy look to the whole effect. So let's take that to right about, yeah, somewhere around 100 I think will look good. And we'll click OK. And just like we did with the other image, I'm going to click and drag this to the name of that other file. Not releasing my mouse yet until I get inside, and then release, and there we have it. So again, like that other layer, we're going to change this layer's blend mode to multiply. And we'll position it over here. I'm actually going to press Command or Control T to bring up the free transform again. Just give this a slight rotation. Perhaps even scale it ever so slightly. And just kind of position that right about there. We'll press Enter, and we've got good placement there. So that's my overall elements, and I can go in here. Maybe we want to bring that city, that building in there, just kind of creeping in on the side a little bit there. Looks pretty good. So we're coming along. It's coming along good, and we're getting, the pieces are coming together. Let's add some of that grungy splash element. If you saw in the original here, they've got this kind of spattered look to it. And that is a real easy way of achieving an interesting effect by going in here, and let's actually go ahead and create a new blank layer first. And I'm going to grab the rectangular marquee tool right here. I'm just going to drag a selection right in this area. Just a long rectangular selection there. And I'm going to go over here, grab my gradient tool, and let's make sure we've got the default color set. I'm just going to hit the letter D to bring the default colors. Make sure I'm using the foreground to transparent gradient, which is the second one right here. And here's what we're going to change. We're going to change the blend mode of the gradient tool itself to dissolve. And let's take the opacity of this to around 75. And I'm just going to start at the bottom of this selection. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and just drag upwards to the top area of the selection. And you'll see I've got kind of an interesting spatter effect there. And of course it is on its own layer, so that looks good. Well, now I want to change the way it looks. So I'm going to press Command or Control T, and then I'm going to go into hold down the Control key or right click right on the object, and we're going to go down here and choose one of my favorite tools, the warp. But before we do that, let's actually scale this up a little bit. And let's go in there and we'll choose warp. And here is where you can just go crazy in making this look as random as you can, just by grabbing any of the corners. You can even click inside the grid and move stuff around. So let's just kind of move these around, pushing it in all different directions, just to see what kind of varying effect we get here. And let's kind of push that on that side, and now I can do that all day. But let's go ahead and press Enter and see what we've got. So we've got an interesting kind of spatter effect there. Well, here's what I want to do. I don't want it to be filled with black. So what I want to do is grab the eyedropper tool here in the toolbar, and make sure you got a fairly large sampling area, at least 5x5 here, so we can sample a range of color. I'm just going to click in this area here, and you'll notice it samples it in the foreground swatch. Let's go ahead and fill this color in with that. So I'm going to lock the transparency of this layer. I'm going to press Option Delete. It would be Alt Backspace on a PC, and you'll see it fills it in with that same color. Then let's change the blend mode of that to Linear Burn. And you'll see it blends in with that background and give it a little bit more detail. So let's kind of position this right down here to give that an element there. And let's go ahead and duplicate that layer and drag it off to another part. Let's take the rotation and give it a little bit of rotation right in here, and that gives me kind of a spatter effect over here, just a tiny bit inside her face there, just to give it a little bit more grunge to it. Let's make another duplicate, one more, and bring it over here, and just go crazy. Let's go ahead and flip this horizontally, and we'll have that kind of cool edge coming into the side there. And we'll just rotate that in. Just different ways of applying it, just to give it kind of that more spattered, kind of grungy look to it. Now, the only last thing to add now is the name. But before we do that, I want to show you how you can highlight the face a little bit. You know, it just kind of gets lost in the overall graphic here. So to enhance that face just ever so slightly, I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer, and we'll put it beneath this layer, the layer of the girl right here. So it's a blank layer beneath there. And let's again grab that gradient tool, making sure we're using that radial gradient, but this time we're going to set it to white. So let's bring white to the foreground. And I'm just going to start right up here around her eye and just drag out. And it'll put a gradient in there. All right, now I got to fix a couple of things because it's still set to dissolve. Curious thing about these settings, the gradient tool especially, is that the settings are sticky. It'll remember the last settings you had. Now, in some cases that's good, but in some cases it isn't. So we've got the settings back to normal. Let's go ahead and draw that gradient back out. It is solid white. I'm going to blend it ever so slightly just by changing the blend mode to soft light. You can see kind of isolates and, you know, makes that draws a little bit more attention to that face ever so slightly. And it is on its own layer. I can drop the opacity if I didn't want it quite as much. You don't even have to have it at all. If you like what you're looking at right there, it's just a way of bringing out the face a little bit more. So all we need to do now is add that little nameplate, that little cool little graphic on the nameplate. And that's really, really cool and easy technique to do that. Let's go ahead and create a new blank layer above at the very top of the layer order here. And going to go over into the toolbar and grab the lasso tool. And here's what we're going to do. It's very cool. I'm just going to simply kind of jagged around the mouse, or I'm actually using a pen, so I'm just kind of going to scatter draw in the shape of a square. So you see what I mean as I do it. I'm just going to click and drag, and you can see what's going on with the lasso. It's just kind of drawing it. But I'm just kind of going back and forth, keeping in mind that I am drawing ultimately a big square. But you want to kind of end up where you first started drawing it, so the selection doesn't have a crossover or anything like that. So you saw what I did. I'll do it one more time. Starting right here, I'm just going to kind of zigzag around, keeping in mind the shape that I'm trying to achieve, which is a square. And we'll come right back to where we were. Maybe a little swoop out there, and there we go. So there's a selection. On a blank layer, I'm just going to hit Shift-Delete So bring up the fill here, and we're going to use black. Click OK. I'm going to press Command or Control D to deselect, and there is our shape that we've created. So let's add an element to this. I'm going to go ahead and double click on it to bring up the layer styles, and we're going to add a drop shadow, but not in the sense that you think. I'm going to go in here and open up the color picker inside the drop shadow area, and we're going to go out here. Since we have the color picker open, we can sample a color in our image. Remember, we sampled this color when we created these spatter effects. Let's sample it again. And we're going to change that blend mode, of course, to linear burn like we had it. Let's take the opacity to 100 and notice what's happening. Let's turn off use global light and change the direction here. Taking the size down to 0, so it's a solid drop shadow. It doesn't have any softness to it. And let's increase that distance a little bit. So we're getting a cool shadowy effect there. Really kind of cool. And all we need to do now is just add some text. So I'm going to go and grab my text tool. Let's click in here. And I chose Jade just because it was a short and cool sounding name, so it worked. And we'll just position it right there. And again, let's go ahead and fill it with keeping the consistency of the color theme here. Let's grab and sample that background color. Option delete or Alt backspace to fill that text layer with that color. And then, just to get the visibility of that top area, let's go ahead and add a drop shadow. I'm going to double click on that layer. Click and activate a drop shadow, makes that readability a little bit more. Increase that distance, make it solid. So it's solid. By setting the size to 0, sets it to solid, and we're just going to increase that distance so those top letters a little bit more stick out there. And boom, there you have it. So a combination of photographs and various elements you create from scratch, you can achieve very interesting overall design layout. Pretty cool stuff.